Thank you, Maxine. Our next speaker, Ms. Lu Lilian, is a little delayed, so we will go straight to the Q&A session. For those of you who have any questions for either of the ambassadors or Ms. Maxine, please raise your hands and come in front. There's a microphone. Yes, sir. Just that microphone, yeah.
Yeah, it works. Okay, let me introduce myself. I'm Herbie Purnish. I'm a retired senior civil servant in Penang. When we listen to the chief minister, he always says, I don't have the authority, number one. Number two, I don't have the money. So I guess he always blames somebody else, yeah? They don't give me the authority to do things, and they don't give me the authority to raise the money to do things. So how, in Europe, did you do it? How did he get the authority, and how did he get the money? Thank you.
Would any of the ambassadors like to take that question on? Yes, Your Excellency.
That's a tough one. I hope the other ones are easier, especially given the fact that none of us are mayors. We're just ambassadors. So we don't have the money, that's for sure. I remember that one of the slides that I showed you was a slide on the project Bilbao Ria 2000. That is, I would say that that's the crux of the whole thing. To get not only the municipality involved, but also to get the people of Bilbao involved, of course you raise the taxes. Of course you raise the money that they pay for water, the money they pay for electricity, the money they pay for the services. That's a given. You also get, in our case, the aid of the central government, who sends money to the municipality in order for them to do all this restructuring, which also adds on to what we want for the whole country, livable, sustainable, green tech cities. But the public-private partnerships are, in my case, I think those are really the answer to your question. Public-private partnerships. The more you get it involved, the private sector. Private sector is one of the big beneficiaries of whatever you do in the city. And I think the more you get them involved, the more you show them where the city is going, the better your plan is, the happier they are to go into this financing, and they do. What you need is a good project that stirs their interest, I would say. And in Bilbao's case, both the 3 or 4 projects I talked about, the Knowledge District, the Bilbao Digital Gate District, the advanced business services, the guarantee, things that will revert back to those businesses, those are the key issues that will get the businesses juices flowing, if I can put it that way, and make them involved with the project. You need to involve them. But I don't know, maybe our other colleagues have some more answers. Thank you.
Do we have a second question from the floor? Yes, sir. Maybe you could also mention who your question is directed to.
Yes. Actually, I have 3 questions. My name is Luis. I'm here for TUB Rhineland, the German certification company. However, first question, I want to get in touch with the Dutch. It's about your bottom-up approach. How did you reach the people? How did you incentivize, with whatsoever, the people to take part in this? And is it the mass of the people, or is it rather an avant-garde that you managed to reach? Second one is to the Danish ambassador regarding Copenhagen. In this attempt to become CO2 neutral, are the external costs, or therefore the external emissions, considered as well for everything you utilize to achieve this target, which is from outside of Copenhagen? To which extent is this considered as well? Third question, and this is maybe for the whole floor or the panel, or it's maybe a bit provocative. We have been talking a lot about growth, green growth, and we're living on a limited planet. So is the concept of unlimited growth still valid? And is it something we can do to achieve the future? Or has the EU maybe already ideas and concepts in the pipeline how to sustain on this planet without or with limited growth? So yeah, looking forward to hearing some good answers. Many thanks.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Shall I answer the first part of your questions, and that's about how to mobilize people? Yeah, to mobilize people, you need, of course, first an idea and a concept that attracts people. But it goes to hand in hand also with in what way are you organized? As, for instance, the urban areas in Amsterdam, there's very much a decentralized concept of the city. You have, of course, a municipal council, but you also have per area in the city municipal councils, and they carry out these projects and they attract people by hearings. And so it's not so much an avant-garde. You have to create a broader platform than that. So it needs, as I said, it needs to implement a lot of these ideas of the smart city. You need a platform. You have to create a platform first, but you have to be organized that you can reach the veins, the inner veins of the city. And that is what Amsterdam and other cities in the Netherlands, and I take it many other cities also in Europe, are doing. To attract the people, to involve them in the decision making, and to show them, of course, with the projects they have, that is beneficial to them in the economic sense and in the quality of life sense.
Thank you very much. I think your question on the CO2 emissions and how to calculate whether you're CO2 neutral or not, of course, is very relevant. There's a lot of methodological issues to it, and it's not only about pushing your own emissions elsewhere so that they are calculated elsewhere. But I think it's about trying to focus on wanting to reduce CO2 emissions, setting a goal, and then you can along the way discuss the intricacies of how you calculate it and so on. But they have established a basis for how they do calculate it, and they look at the different areas of reducing CO2 emissions from heating, from transport, etc. And I'll be happy to leave you with a booklet where you can study with some links further on the methodological issues. But of course, I mean, you have a point. I mean, there is sometimes a tendency to, establish these goals that are very lofty and sounds very nice. But I honestly do think that in this case, Copenhagen has actually committed itself and they established a plan for how they intend to reach it. So it's not only hot air, no pun intended.
Thank you. First of all, we are most of all looking at Europe. So the question about worldwide unlimited growth, uncontrolled growth, I cannot address. I can only speak for what concerns Europe. I mentioned in the beginning of my introduction that urban planning per se is not a European competence. For those who do not know how the European Union functions, sometimes doesn't function. We are a union of 28 member states and we're a very complex organization. We have been given competences in a number of areas by the member states where they thought that the European dimension would be more, would bring economies of scale as such, if I can put it like that. Urban planning as such is not one of these competences. Now, having said that, there are a number of European policies that obviously touch upon European planning, environmental policy, not in the least. As I mentioned, we have developed this Europe 2020 strategy for smart, sustainable, and inclusive growth. And the idea is obviously to promote growth. We need growth. We desperately need growth. Having it unlimited is maybe a little bit far-fetched or overstretched. But as I mentioned before, we look at Europe. We try as much as possible to show and share our best practices with the rest of the world without wanting to be paternalistic. I know that a couple of decades ago we had this reputation of going around the world and telling everybody how they should shape up in order to be as good as we were with regional integration. We luckily stepped away from that approach, and we are now much more trying to share with you definitely as much where we went wrong as what we did right, just in order to make sure that you don't make the same mistake and that we can all work for a better world in the end. So. Sorry, that was it.
Yes, sir. Right. Maybe are there any ambassadors from the countries who haven't presented, who have an idea and could talk about distribution versus growth?
Okay, I'll give it a shot. As I mentioned in this Europe 2020 strategy, the idea is to come to inclusive growth. And that obviously means that we would like to see this growth be impact on as much as possible. I don't know if that is what you mean by distribution, the distribution of the wealth created in cities and beyond. This is something that we aim for. Now, if this always works perfectly, that's another thing. But we are the European Union. We're known all over the world for being very much focused on discussion and deliberating and making compromises, talk until we're blue in the face, keel over, come back to the table the next morning, bright and early, and continue. We're a soft power. But so far it has helped, and I think that is the way in which we try to share best practices. We usually have this thing that we call best practices that we have in very many areas of policy at European level, where we try to showcase how it is done in other cities and other regions in Europe, and hope that we can share these experiences and that other less endowed parts of Europe can benefit from it. So I don't know if, Maria, Spanish ambassador.
Let me try to answer the first part of the question. I don't know who it was because I haven't seen. Okay, over there. How do we teach? I don't like the word teach. How do we share the experiences of cities that are green with cities that are still not there? 2 or 3 ideas come to mind. First of all, the example of Seville and Barcelona. These were cities that were great cities anyway, but that needed a lot of rehab being done to them, and that needed a lot of green technology to be incorporated. The key factor in both cases were international events. So international event number 1, the Olympic Games in Barcelona, 1992, that really pushed the city to another level. International event number 2, the World Expo in Seville, 1992, it pushed it to another level. So international events, I would say, are big issues that will help you get there. Second thing, there are big exhibitions and seminars. There's one going on in Barcelona right now about green cities, green technology, etc., where mayors and councillors of many cities in the world regroup every year. I think it's a yearly event that is going on now, if I'm not mistaken. And that's where you do the networking. That's where you see what's happening in other cities, what can be done in Ipoh, what can't be done in Ipoh yet. And the third thing I would say is education. We haven't talked about that, but green cities don't just appear on the mayor's planning table out of the blue. Much of it is also a consequence of education, and education done at the level of kids. I remember I lived for 4 years in New Delhi. One of the biggest things that we did in the embassy, and that was really very innovative for the people who worked at the embassy, at the residence of the ambassador there, was to do different, to sort out the waste, to separate the waste. They had never done it. So when I introduced waste separation there, they said, okay, so now the bottles go here, that goes there. Very elemental things. But if you teach them when you're young, kids come back home and say, where's the waste separation in this house? There isn't. Okay? So, you know, just 3 things to think about. And as for distribution, in Bilbao, I think I told you that there were 3 main parts to the city. The reduced city, the city that houses 354,000 people. The old historic part, which was really in a very bad state. The Ensanche, which was where the nice houses were, and then the working class district. I have to tell you, I've been to Bilbao years after. All 3 have benefited. You can't do one without doing the rest. As soon as one takes off, and then it just slowly goes on to the other ones, the working class district has become a completely different thing. So yeah, and upgraded, and there you have the distribution. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Please have the question.
Good morning. My name is Boo. I'm into education. I teach secondary school kids biology, chemistry, and physics. And I believe that no teacher or student in Malaysia will know about magnesium, aluminum, and phosphate fertilizers. We were never taught that. So which brings me to the question that I shall pose to Bilbao. Yes, transparency, you have achieved 100%, bravo. But 30 years from 1983, where you had a crisis which were extensive, environmentally, socially, and how you have changed and transformed in 30 years into what you are right now. You mentioned specifically about the rise in percentage of the services from 36% to 62%. So I'm fascinated to know exactly how. I'm sure 62% services is not just expansion in banking sector or transportation. I'm sure there are more than that, so I would be interested to know that. And I believe in Penang, if we identify Penang and Bilbao, we have the history and heritage that we can relate to one another. We have in Penang so much we can offer. And I believe we are on the world landmark in certain ways in terms of our heritage site. Okay, so that's on Bilbao. Amsterdam. Solid waste management, wastewater management, scientific based approaches which I'm sure the people, the corporate businessmen and scientists would have collaborated. But you would have learned it somewhere else. So would it be a norm for any innovation for things to happen in your city? First of all, you will need to send them elsewhere where such things are done. So I would think of, for example, in Penang itself, we have people who are going to be sent to Amsterdam to learn about these things, eventually to put into practice in our own state and country here. So that's one. lampposts and I don't know whether those who are in Penang right now, we do have independent solar powered lampposts where it doesn't need TNB lines. So we don't need TNB to go and put up and wait for some maybe donkey months, maybe no TNB people here. Okay, anyway, so yeah, that is one, but how widespread is it practiced in Amsterdam in terms of electric solar panel lampposts? Copenhagen. Bicycle success, amazing, but I'm sure there would be some measures taken to restrict the ownership of cars, maybe some restrictive, punitive ways. You want to drive a car, you pay more, that kind of thing. So maybe you could let us know, enlighten on that. That's all, thank you.
On Bilbao, I'll be very happy if you give me your card to get you a little bit more information on how we changed from a majority industrial sector to a majority 62% services sector, 27% industrial sector, because I don't know the exact details. I do know that there are now 2,300 companies in Bilbao. They represent 11% of the business fabric of the city, and they employ 28,000 people. Now, what are the sectors the services sectors that are there? Most of them have to do with the business, with the enterprises, the industrial part. So the services sector that caters to the industry in Bilbao. But others have also to do with a lot of architecture and design. I mean, this city was reinvented along architecture and design, and there are many enterprises. They didn't necessarily ask for help outside of Bilbao. They brought in architects, yes, but they created their own firms. Those are services. Also, all those enterprises that were born around the transportation system and the infrastructure system, they are new also. And Bilbao is now becoming a city of design based. So that's a lot of, there are a lot of avant-garde services in that area also, plus the tourism and everything that has to do with the Guggenheim Museum, which it started being a project. As you know, the Guggenheim represents a ship. The ship represents the commercial side of Bilbao, how it was born. And they were courageous enough to get the ship, the image of the ship, which was in a way a polluting factor in the ancient Bilbao, and make it up and let it become a symbol, a modern symbol of what Bilbao is. And around the Guggenheim and the arts, there are many services. You would be surprised at how many conferences and events go on in and around the Guggenheim Museum. So that's another part of the services. But this is just a very general overview. I can ask always the mayor of Bilbao, who's a good friend and also has some very talented people with them, to give me more information that I can pass on to you.
Thank you, Marie. Your question on how did it get that far in Amsterdam when it comes to solid waste management and putting waste to energy. For that, you need an integration, I think, of research, private sector, and government. They have to work hand in hand to develop such concepts. And that you see in the Netherlands a lot. You have, for instance, Food Valley in Eindhoven that works on new food technologies. You have in Eindhoven, which calls itself one of the smartest regions in the world. It's an integration of research, so the academic world, private sector, and government that puts in a financial support for that. That is the basis of getting to these new techniques, getting into waste management, getting into waste to energy concepts. Talking about the street lighting, I think it's a mistake. It's not solar lighting. It's adjustable lighting, so that you can cut down on your expenses on electricity for your public lighting. So, for instance, if there's less traffic, then there will be less also public lighting. It needs smart technology, these things, and that is what is developed. It's not widespread yet. I believe it's only a few hundred lampposts that work like that, but it's of course a sort of pilot project. It will be developed into, if it's successful, into a wider application.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you. Then there was also the question about whether there's more to it than what we talked about already in terms of giving people the incentive to shift to bikes. And of course, there are pull and pull factors, that's for sure. I think the pull factors are all those that I mentioned earlier, you know, what makes it easier and more attractive to jump on the bike or use the public transport system. But there are also heavy push factors in the sense that Denmark, for instance, we've never had an automotive industry. We leave that to France, Germany, Sweden, others who are much better at that. And I think that means that we've been able to tax the import of cars heavily because there was no domestic industry who would fight against it. So it's very expensive to buy a car in Denmark. On top of that, we also have a fuel taxing system, which means that a liter of petrol costs in the order of 7.5 ringgit per liter. So it's very expensive. That's another very good incentive to get on the bike because you save a lot of money. So that's just to mention some of the other factors that are pushing you onto the bike besides the good reasons for jumping on it in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you.